There is a moment almost everyone eventually has, though very few people talk about it out loud. You're doing something completely ordinary, pouring a coffee, tightening a bolt, laughing at your own joke half a second before the punchline lands, and you catch it, you recognize it. The gesture isn't originally yours, you're doing it exactly the way someone else did it first, someone who taught you without ever meaning to teach you anything. We like to think of ourselves as self-authored, the main character of a story we have been writing alone since the day we were born. Self-made is one of the most persistent compliments in modern life, and one of the least accurate. Most of what actually built you was written by other hands first, and it kept writing itself into you long after you stopped noticing the ink. It shows up in the smallest possible places, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss. The specific pause before you say something honest, the way you fold a letter before sealing it, the joke you reach for when a room gets too heavy and needs air. None of these were invented in isolation. Every one of them has an author somewhere, even if you couldn't name them on the spot. None of them are in the room with you now, but that's how most relationships work. Someone shapes you deeply for a season, and then life moves, and they're simply elsewhere, and still something of them keeps running. That's what this video is actually about, not endings. The opposite, actually. How much of who you are is presence, borrowed, still active, still doing things in the world through you, whether or not the person who gave it to you is anywhere nearby to see it happen. Here's an idea. You're not only living one life, you're living your own, and you're already living someone else's second one, using your hands, your timing, your particular way of forgiving people who don't deserve it yet. Act 1. The myth of self-made. Modern life tells us a very particular story about identity, that we are, or at least should be, self-made. Self-improvement culture, personal branding, the entire vocabulary of bootstraps and hustle, all of it rests on the idea that who you are is something you built alone, from scratch, through sheer will. It is a compelling story. It also falls apart almost immediately once you look closely at how any actual person becomes who they are. The psychologist Lev Vygotsky described something he called internalization. Before we can consciously choose anything about ourselves, we observe the people around us, their tone of voice, their patience on their impatience, their specific way of handling disappointment. What starts out as a conversation between two people eventually becomes a conversation happening entirely inside one person. The outside voice moves on and starts speaking as if it had always been yours. You didn't invent the way you apologize. Somebody modeled it for you. Once, probably without either of you noticing it was a lesson, and you kept it. You're still using it. You will probably still be using it decades from now, in a room that person may never enter, in a conversation they will never know they're a part of. This is easy to dismiss as sentimental until you actually try to trace your own habits back to their source. Pull any one of those threads far enough and you will almost always find another person standing at the other end of it. Someone who taught you that particular note without ever writing you a lesson plan. Act 2. The second life. There's a philosophy for this that goes back much further than modern psychology. Ubuntu, a concept with roots across southern Africa, is often translated as I am because we are. Personhood in this view was never a solo project. You do not become fully yourself alone in a room. You become yourself continuously through others, not as a metaphor, but as a mechanism. This is what I mean by a second life. It is simply an ordinary, constant fact of being a person. Everyone who has ever shaped you left something running. It runs quietly in the background, mostly invisible, until one day you catch yourself using it and realize you're not entirely sure anymore where you end and they begin. Think about how strange this actually is. If you slow down enough to notice it, you did not consent to most of what makes you, you. You didn't sit down at 6 years old and choose your sense of humor, your instinct for loyalty, the way you go quiet when you're actually the most upset. Somebody else built the first draft of nearly all of it, and you have spent every year since editing, sometimes without even realizing there was ever an original author besides you. Think of it less like a torch passed once at a single dramatic ceremony and more like a current, something that keeps moving through you, picking up your particular resistance, your particular shape before it moves on into whoever you're currently shaping without meaning to. A younger sibling maybe, a student, a friend going through something you've already survived. You are at every point in that current both the receiver and the source. Both editions exist in you simultaneously. Act 3. What the hands remember. Walk into any Renaissance workshop and you would find this same idea already built into the architecture of the room. Apprentices didn't just learn painting theory from the master. They ground his pigments, they stretched his canvases, they held the brush exactly the way he held it over and over thousands of times until their wrist forgot it was ever imitating anything at all. You can still see it today, if you know where to look. A certain confidence in a brush stroke that shows up across 3 different painters working decades apart, none of whom ever met, all of whom happened to train under the same teacher's teacher. Art historians can still trace entire lineages this way today, tracing whose student painted what a generation later, because technique travels through the body like a dialect. A dialect doesn't disappear the moment the person who first spoke it walks out of the room. It just keeps being spoken in a slightly different accent by whoever learned it next. Marcus Aurelius did something remarkably similar, and he wasn't even trying to write anything anyone else would ever read. Book 1 of his Meditations, a private journal never intended for publication, opens not with philosophy but with an inventory. From my grandfather Verus I learned good character, from my mother generosity, from one tutor endurance, from another patience. Page after page, arguably the most powerful man in the Roman world takes stock of himself and finds essentially other people. He does not describe himself as self-made, he describes himself as assembled, gratefully out of everyone who shaped him before he was old enough to shape himself. Imagine doing that to yourself for a moment, not for an audience, not for a caption, just privately, honestly. Working out on paper exactly which parts of you belong to someone else first. Most of us never do it. Aurelius did, and what he found wasn't a smaller version of himself, it was a fuller one. Act 4. What culture already knew. Culture keeps circling the same idea. In Interstellar, Cooper spent light years away from his daughter Murph, stretched across a gap in time that neither of them chose and neither of them can undo. And yet the instruction he left her is exactly what eventually allows her as an adult to solve the equation that saves everyone left on Earth. He isn't in the room, he is barely even in the same decade relative to her. But what he gave her keeps working anyway, across the distance, without him. It's worth noticing what the film doesn't do. It never suggests Murph should have simply moved on from her father's absence or built an identity that excluded him in order to become fully independent. Her breakthrough only happens because she keeps returning to what he left, turning it over, trusting it even when trusting it seems irrational. The influence isn't a weight she has to escape, it's the exact tool she needed. You find the same instinct in music, in a completely different language and a completely different culture. Fairuz's song named سألوني الناس, which translates to "The People Ask Me," has become for generations of Arabic-speaking listeners less a song than a room you enter when someone who shaped you isn't within reach anymore. Not because anything happened to them, just because that's what the song is built to hold. Presence at a distance. There's no dramatic event required for a song like that to matter. Someone simply moves to another city, drifts out of daily contact, becomes a person you think of at odd hours for no clear reason. And the song becomes the room where that thinking happens on purpose, instead of by accident. Both stories, one from a spaceship, one from a decades-old recording, are making the same argument. Distance doesn't cancel influence. Time doesn't either. What someone gives you doesn't need them standing next to you to keep functioning. It just needs you, still carrying it, still running it, usually without even remembering you picked it up in the first place. Act 5. The question you carry. Here is a part no one tells you until it happens to you directly. One day, you will be standing in a doorway or holding a tool or comforting a friend, using a phrase you didn't consciously choose in a tone you didn't invent, and you will feel it, a small, quiet vertigo, You're someone's second life. Not a copy, not an accident, a continuation mid-sentence. Still being written, except now you're the one holding the pen. Maybe it's a friend you talk to every week. Maybe it's a teacher you haven't spoken to in 15 years and probably never will again. Maybe it's someone you knew for a single conversation on a single ordinary day, who said one true thing at exactly the right moment, never knowing what they would left behind in yours. It just needs enough time, enough attention, and one person willing to actually notice what they picked up. You're not only living your own life right now, you're also carrying someone else's forward. In the choices you make when no one's watching, in the kindness you extend without deciding to, in the specific, unrepeatable way you've learned to love and to forgive and to keep going. So here is what I will leave you with. Instead of an answer, I will leave you with a question. Whose second life are you already living right now in ways you probably haven't noticed yet? And somewhere out there in a life you may never see the middle or the end of, whose second life might already be running on you.